Hey listeners, Shadows and Sightings is a paranormal comedy podcast. Though we keep things lighthearted, we understand some topics may be sensitive to some listeners. These topics include violence, gore, death, and suicide. If you have trauma related to any of these topics, express caution before listening. Thank you and enjoy the show. Not too long before that cock starts sucking on a tit, eh?
What a sentence. What's up, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Shadows and Sightings, a paranormal podcast where we talk about all things spooky and creepy and weird and strange. And this is our kickoff episode for the spooky season of Halloween. I'm Taylor.
I'm Nick.
And I'm Britt.
And today we are talking about witches.
Witches don't really register as spooky to me.
Why not?
I don't think I've ever seen a movie where there's like a witch and like it's like, oh God, that's
Not even the movie The Witch?
No, that wasn't really like spooky scary. That was more like thriller kind of.
It was just the goat. The goat.
That was the scariest part.
Black Phillip.
When he gets up and starts like walking on his hind legs, that was terrifying.
All goats do that. He didn't walk on them for very long. He just reared back and
just enough to be unnatural.
Yeah, like you seeing it, you're like, that's not a natural goat. There's nothing natural about that goat. There's some weird things with that goat.
I guess so. So when you think of a witch, what's the first thing that pops into your mind?
I think of the iconic broomstick riding across the sky in cauldrons, massive rooms full of cauldrons and green potions.
Okay,
It doesn't really have anything to do with the character itself.
Yeah, nothing at all. That's what the first thing that comes to my mind.
Yeah, it's like when you think about witches, when somebody's like, oh, witches, what's the first thing that pops into your brain?
Just that stereotypical green face with like the crooked nose and
The big pointy hat floating around.
Black cape.
The black cat.
Does it not conjure up, let's see what I did there, images of Hogwarts and Harry Potter?
Not so much.
That doesn't come to mind. Like,
In
no.
their jumpers.
Just that traditional, stereotypical green witch.
Like
Wicked Witch of the...
Exactly. West.
It's always a silhouette. A little witch silhouette, you know?
And the cackle, the witch's cackle.
Yeah.
Hansel and Gretel.
That witch that lured kids in to
The
her
old
house with
hag,
candy.
just to eat them.
Yeah.
Terrifying.
Man.
Could you
That's what I
imagine?
think of, more or less, is the stereotypical classic witch flying across the moon on her broom. Green nose. Green face. Not just the nose being green. Warts on her nose, I guess. Big crooked nose thing. Black cape.
A decrepit shack out in the forest somewhere.
Yeah. Luring children in.
Cauldrons.
Hocus pocus-esque.
What do you think of?
Told you. Green face, crooked nose, that silhouette. The cackle. The classic cackle.
She did tell you. You just weren't listening.
Yeah, no, the janky ass teeth.
It's always that one tooth.
And like the long outstretched finger.
Yeah.
I mean,
like the bony fingers, like
When you were a kid and you would go trick or treating, were there ever like the houses where the parents would be dressed up as witches or anything?
I vaguely remember some like people dressed up like witches.
Yeah.
More like the stereotypical of what we think of like as a Halloween witch. If I ever would have seen like someone dressed up like an old hag, like it wouldn't have been, that's a witch. It would have been, hey, there's something wrong with that person. Like, does she need help?
Not going back to that house.
Ma'am, are you okay? Do you need me to call someone from your family?
Get out.
It's a challenging laugh you have there.
It's
Like the Baldur's Gate hag. Did you come across her yet?
I have not.
No, geez. Okay, never mind. I won't spoil that for you. Then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I won't spoil it for you. I mean, it's Act 1, so you should have found her by now. But if you didn't, you missed a big plot point.
Yeah, I need to go back. I need to actually sit down and devote more time to that game.
You should.
But I know the second that I do, my life's going to erode away.
Hey, as long as you show up on Sundays to record the podcast, that's all we care about.
Like that game, it's the top rated comment on Steam for that game. Somebody asked like, how good is this game? And like the top rated comment was, this game ruined my life.
Jeez. So anyways, we're going to be diving into witches today, and we're welcoming Brittany back to the show. Brittany, how have you been?
Yeah. Welcome back.
On your 4-episode hiatus. I think it's been 4 episodes. Something like that.
Yeah.
We had to recruit you in to talk about witches. Not that you are a witch or anything that I know of.
No, I'm not. I'm not an expert on the subject, but done a little research here.
We couldn't fit all the research into between just 2 people, so we had to outsource.
It is a very broad topic.
Oh, it's huge.
It
spans centuries.
And you have North American witches, European witches, and then pretty much every culture in the world has some version or variation of what a witch is.
Mm-hmm. There's no shortage of it.
So I'm sure we'll kind of get into a little bit of that today.
So I was more interested in kind of the North American take on it and kind of the history of that. So that's really what I looked into. Did you kind of look at any place else other than
I kind of kept it the same to what you were kind of looking at. Let's keep it in North America for now, and
yeah, we're going to try to keep it kind of focused on what we're going to discuss regarding witches and witchcraft. And since it's spooky season, that's kind of where we're going to start. Maybe
in future episodes, if we want to look at like other variations of witches around the world or something like that.
Yeah.
Like it's a pretty crazy culture of the witches in Romania. I think it's Romania. They have like actual TV shows of witches that you can like call in.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And like try to get like, your fortune read, or like, I think you can hire them to actually cast spells and stuff.
Mm-hmm. I think there was a lady, she was like the most popular witch in Salem for the longest time, Lori Cabot. I think she did the same thing where you could call in.
Yeah.
But she like actually did some pretty creepy stuff in terms of how accurate it would be. I was listening to Salem, the podcast, which is another awesome podcast if you want to check out a good one. They were talking about it. There was a crime spree or something going on in Salem, and they were trying to find the body of this missing kid or something. And somehow she got like a portion of the kid's clothing or something, or they've supplied something to her, and she knew where this kid was and where they left the body, and she found it. And the police were like, "That's crazy how you knew."
I've heard of a couple circumstances like that. I've
Yeah,
actually
really
heard of
like
cops
mediums.
like reaching out to
mediums,
sensitives.
Yeah,
it was wild. I never knew that was like a thing that the police actually would do, is reach out to a psychic or a witch in this instance.
I feel because it was Salem in that environment,
it makes sense.
It makes sense. I feel like if they tried to pull that in like New York, it wouldn't fly. So you just contacted, and she somehow knew bring her in for questioning.
Yeah, right.
Like suspect number 1. Okay, give me the deets.
You were there, weren't you? You put this guy in the bottom of the river?
These are your initials, aren't they? Huh?
Wait, what?
We have you on camera. Flew down on your freaking broomstick. You snatched up the kid.
And you just left him there. Just threw him in the river.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So I feel because it was Salem.
I'm going to let you off with a warning.
Yeah, right. I mean, like, don't let it happen again.
Oh, boy. All right. So you said you were thinking about was it the origins of North American witchcraft?
Yeah, and really more North American European witchcraft. So kind of where all that started.
Well, that's how it did start, right?
So modern witchcraft, particularly Wicca, can trace its roots back to European pre-Christian pagan traditions, like folklore practices, belief in natural spirits, magic, and ancient gods. These ideas, combined with modern occult practices, provide the framework for what would become Wicca. So it really started in Europe and kind of translated over here when people started immigrating over.
I guess it would help. What is like the actual definition of like a witch?
Back then it was really more just traditional beliefs and religion that then Christianity kind of tried to demonize and make the bad guy. So kind of taking their beliefs and just, twisting them a little bit to make it sound like they're trying to do things they're not trying to do.
Not like whitewashing it, but
But kind of.
But Christianity watching it, I guess. I get what you're saying. Which was pretty common, right? Like when the Crusades were going on and everything, the missionaries would just show up, the Crusaders would show up. And essentially, I can't even imagine how many religions were actually wiped out. Probably religions and practices that were just lost with time in history because they kind of just showed up. And
anything that was a pagan was, it was.
If you look up the definition of like a witch, it depends on, I guess, how you view witchcraft.
Right. So historically, it would have been anything that didn't conform to that Christianity.
Essentially, like paganism or anything like that.
Or
anything
occult practices.
Yeah, exactly. Outside of the norm. We have the traditional, well, when I say traditional, but a witch is considered a person, especially a woman, who is credited with having usually malignant supernatural powers. In some definitions, it's a woman who's believed to practice black magic, often with the aid of a devil or a familiar. But the more common accepted term today or belief is it's a practitioner of witchcraft, especially in adherence with neo-pagan traditions or religions such as Wicca. While modern witches do believe in the ability to harness the forces of nature, Wicca has nothing to do with Satan or evil spells, which is, I think, kind of a misconception that when we hear Wicca, there's that negative connotation kind of associated with it, where it's like, oh man, it's like it's witchcraft, you know, and it's, but in all reality,
black magic woman.
Yeah, but in all reality, they're like, no, we're just practicing more,
trying to get closer to nature.
Yeah, pretty much.
So I seen that there was two different things. There's like white magic and black magic, and white magic is more of what Wiccans practice now, where it's essentially more nature based, where they're trying to cast spells for peace and love and those kind of things to bring kind of a more positive connection into your house, instead of what black magic would be, the opposite, cursing people and casting spells on them to bring harm to them.
So kind of going back to what you were talking about then, like with the origins and stuff, it kind of comes over from Europe with the witchcraft that we had back then. And you had mentioned...
Which in calling it witchcraft, it was really just any other religion, any pagan religion that wasn't Christianity.
Sure.
You know,
enemies of the church, as it were.
Yeah, basically. So Puritanism was the big thing over here at the time with all the colonization. And of course, they had really strict beliefs. Anything that wasn't, you know, in the Bible. Puritans really believed that the devil was constantly working to undermine everything they did, and that witches were kind of agents of Satan, just like doing their bidding and like trying to undermine anything that Puritans were trying to do, or even their day-to-day life.
Which was nothing, because Puritans didn't believe in actually doing anything
basically,
fun. Yeah. You work and you praise God, and that is all you can do. And if you do anything else, you're a witch.
Yeah. So anything that went wrong, illness, death, crop failure, you know, was always blamed on a curse or,
The devil did it. You didn't water your plants. It's like, nope, it was the devil.
It was also really used anytime anybody had any kind of like
beef.
Yeah, beef with anybody, or you know, wanted their land or their wife.
Like they quickly became weaponized.
Oh yeah,
it was,
for sure. Because it was easy to cause panic with it.
Control, panic. If you wanted to get rid of somebody,
yeah,
like
because to understand the Puritan mentality is that the devil is real. I mean, it's like these are in 1600s Puritan ways. The devil was as much a part of their life and as real as us sitting in this room right now.
No.
So, like you said, they started weaponizing it, because once you hear fire and brimstone sermons every day, 3 to 4 times a day, that's all you know, that hell is a bad place and the devil works against you and he's constantly conspiring against you. And that's why you need to pray to God all the time.
Vigilant.
And you cannot have any earthly pleasures or any earthly belongings that are outside of the norm. So if somebody's rich, like you were saying, that's somebody had to have been working with the devil in that case. So how do you get that person to not be rich anymore? Oh, they're a witch. They've been working with the devil. That's how they got their
conspires.
Yeah.
Also, with being like a colonizer, you're in this land you don't know anything about, you know, there's a lot of new diseases, like everything is like unknown. So there's a lot of fear.
Oh yeah.
You know,
there's starvation because you don't know what your crops are going to do that year.
Right.
There's always the possibility of indigenous attacks, because back then you started a settlement or a colony and 300 yards away is an indigenous person's camp, and they don't know who you are. They're just going to come in, and you're now encroaching on their land. So it was never a sure thing that you weren't going to have Native Americans come in and just raid the town.
So a lot of it was just ignorance fueled, if you got sick, they didn't know why. Blame it on the devil, Even if people got better, they didn't know why. So blame this witch for, if they were using medicine, it must be the devil. So.
Holy shit, you were just in your house the other day. How are you outside?
It's so ridiculous how it's
even if they were doing positive things and like,
wait, so my sickness went away. Isn't that a miracle from God? Pff, no, it's a curse from the devil.
Clearly, you didn't ask this from God. God would never give this to you. The devil gave this to you. To feel better? Come on, God doesn't do that.
It's like,
then what are we doing here?
What are we praying for?
You're praying so you don't go to hell. God doesn't give you anything you want. He only gives you what you need.
We're Puritans.
Of course, you mix a little bit of ignorance with preaching things and like a group. It kind of adds to like a mass hysteria because you're all kind of believing the same thing and kind of witnessing the same unexplainable things. So
by unexplainable, it's like to that just lack of common sense.
Right. Kind of leads to that mob mentality.
That's what it is, though. It's always so crazy, like seeing how this stuff was like portrayed, like in like modern films and stuff, but like reading the text and everything from back then. Just some of like the batshit crazy, just instances of like why somebody could be a witch.
Yeah.
And like you said, it was a lack of ignorance. It's
not a lack of ignorance,
or an abundance of ignorance, a lack of common sense.
Yeah. It was also, like she was saying, things that couldn't be explained. And that could have been a simple thing as a birthmark. People didn't know what birthmarks were back then, so they thought that a birthmark was like essentially a third eye, like when you're practicing witchcraft, and that was a way for the devil
or sometimes a witch's teat, which was
exactly.
like where they would feed their little.
It could have been a skin tab, and that was a witch's teat, and they would have their familiars would suckle from these teats. It's just insane stuff, man. It was just crazy.
You mentioned the trials.
It really started, it was popular in Europe, and that didn't really start until after a book called the Maleficarum came out, and that's when the church started seeing witches not just as something that's made up and make believe. This is a real thing. Practicing witchcraft, you're a heretic. And if you're caught being a heretic, your punishment was being burned at the stake. So witches and heresy became synonymous. And that's how those trials started. And then, like you said, once you get into a mass hysteria, you can blame your neighbor, just people you don't like. Anybody could be a witch at that point, and they're going to get burned at the stake.
And then, of course, they capture them and torture them into confessing.
Yeah. So. And a heretic, in the same instance, is you got tortured until you admitted to being a heretic. And then they're like, okay, well, you admitted it. Well, yeah, because you just tortured them for a month straight to say that they were guilty, and then you kill them anyway.
You have literally been feeding me nothing but water and vinegar for 2 weeks straight.
I've seen one instance where they said that they had somebody, they made them stay awake for like 40 hours at a time.
Oh my gosh.
Just to finally admit to practicing witchcraft, quote unquote. And then they're like, aha, we got you. Put them to death, burn them at the stake. It's insane.
Just the stupidity of people back then.
Yeah. So the European witch trials kind of started after those two things lined up. And then the Pope, I believe, called witchcraft, I don't know what the Latin term was, but it was like a crime exception. So all the rules were off if you got caught practicing witchcraft, quote unquote. So if you got caught doing it, you didn't get a trial. You didn't get a fair shake of proving your innocence. You were essentially tortured and made to admit it, and then you were burned at the stake. So the European witch trials were much worse than any American witch trials. I've seen anywhere between 40 and 60,000 people were killed during witch trials in Europe. Yeah.
What was the time span difference between the European and the American?
European, it was like mid 1400s to late 1500s.
The first account in America was 1647 in Connecticut, and there was 11 people hung.
Well, that to me is just crazy.
So the Salem witch trials were 1692.
February 1692 until May of 1693. So it only lasted a little more than a year. And I guess the European witch trials kind of ended in like the late 1500s, and then the Puritans brought this back because
just keep that going, you know. And it was 200 people, around 200.
200 were accused.
Yeah. And 20 were executed.
14 women and 5 men. So clearly, as history shows, this is more of a crime against women than anything. I don't know if that was on purpose or if just I assume that it was on purpose, but
it does come down to more that control thing again. You know, any woman who spoke out of term or even lived by herself and didn't want to get married, you know, were like suspicious, you know, because they were outside the cultural norm, you know, so that automatically made them a target.
Put a target on them.
But then after that, the Salem witch trials, it kind of died down in terms of demonizing witchcraft and witches until modern day. I guess it's kind of been like on the outskirts of what's normal. I mean, you hear about witches and you're like, okay, maybe that's a little strange, but people aren't actively trying to hang them anymore. So
it's definitely around that Enlightenment era.
Yeah.
Where some more scientific evidence started coming out, you know, medicine could start being explained and not everything was a big mystery anymore.
You're saying that vitamin C actually helps keep diseases away?
Maybe you should actually wash your hands because, you know, you just...
Hey, don't leave this bread out for 6 months at a time and then eat it. That's mold on there. It's not, I don't know what you think this is, but it's mold.
It's where all the seasoning is. It's all the taste, all the nutrients. Yeah, it completely dies down.
I wouldn't say completely.
But wasn't it with Salem after the witch trials, like some 50 years later, they went back and realized, hey, we kind of made a mistake, and they put a plaque up.
Well,
or they acknowledged it at least.
I don't even think it took them that long. I mean, it did take a while, but they actually, to some of the victims' families, they gave them reparations, essentially, for how much damage they caused for that person to have been killed unlawfully. And sometimes it took, 2 or 3 generations to finally see that money. And then it usually wasn't even that much. I think it was 1992. So 300 years later, they put in the park that we were in. It's like a square right next to the old burying point. Yeah. And it's a memorial to all the victims that were hanged. And then there's Proctor's Ledge as well, where the actual hangings took place. And there's another memorial there.
After the Salem witch trials, it kind of...
Like I said, the Enlightenment period really kind of killed off all that superstition and things like that, you know.
Okay.
And of course, there was government reforms that made it illegal and harder to convict somebody for being a witch, you know.
Which is crazy to think about. The government had to step in and put laws in place. Because I guess the assumption is that witchcraft, religious freedom is here to stay. So people are going to practice what they're going to practice.
Of course, like due process kicks in and it's a little bit harder just to point a finger and be like, look at that wart.
Yeah,
that's suspicious.
Exactly. That's the thing that always gets me is the lack of evidence that you'd had to supply to convict somebody of being a witch. You could have, so we're accusing Nick of being a witch. And all we have to say is,
look at that spot on his cheek.
I seen Nick. He came to my house as a specter and he stood at the foot of my bed. And then I seen him leave through the window and turn into an owl. And that's my evidence. And the entire church,
and then he gets tortured.
Yeah. It's like, look, he's got a mole on his face. That's clearly the sign that this owl that he saw suckles at his face. And that's how he returns his familiar. He must be a witch.
No, I've never seen that man a day in my life.
Let's see if he floats. That'll prove it.
You could say that. And then they would be like, clearly they've seen this. So you are an owl. Yeah.
Where the fuck is the logic in that?
Exactly. And then I would be like, hey, Brittany, you see the mole on his face, right? That's clearly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. See, it's 2 people now.
I don't even know.
So you're a witch?
No.
Yep. Okay.
I got sick last week and he didn't. So
how about that?
That's your own damn problem.
How about that? And then just from there, everybody would just gang up on you. Yep. And then it would be, okay, well, until you admit that you're a witch, we're going to throw you in jail.
Pretty much.
And then you would die in jail sometimes.
Or we can throw him in the river, see if he floats.
Or you can tell us who you're in league with, who else in this room is a witch.
There you go.
And then maybe we'll let you go. If you tell us who else is a witch in town.
I think you're a witch.
Well, that's just not true because
prove it.
Because I'm a priest or a preacher. I'm a clergyman.
Preachers can't be witches.
Exactly. If you can recite the Lord's Prayer, you're not a witch. There was actually an instance where one of the people being hanged actually recited the Lord's Prayer before he got hanged, and they're like, I still think the devil let him say that.
Yeah.
Hang him anyway. It's like, what?
Nope, doesn't count.
So we're not even using our own logic at this point. We're not even, like, what are we doing here?
It just really showcased the stupidity of people.
That, and like you were saying, the mob mentality and the hysteria, and I think the general fear of that era. late 1600s, again, it's just, you're in a new place, a new town, anything can happen.
Good old fashioned groupthink psychology right there. Everybody clearly sees that there's an issue, but nobody wants to speak up. The majority of the group kind of just goes with the flow. Nobody wants to speak out of turn.
I don't even know if it's that, though. I think it's more the Salem witch trials. I don't want to get too deep into the Salem, but this is, so the two like teenage girls that started the witch trials essentially blamed it on an slave named Tituba.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And told everybody that she was a witch and giving them fits of rage and fits and all this stuff. So they made Tituba say who else is a witch. And she knew who the family didn't like. So she blamed this person and another family, right? Once that happened and they accused this person of being a witch and put her to death, now it's like, oh, so if we do this to this person, if I don't like this person, it doesn't matter now because this is witchcraft. So I can take this person's land now. If they get accused as a witch, I'm going to tell my friends that this person's a witch and let's all get them. Mm-hmm. And then that just from there, it just spirals out of control. It just
became like a political weapon at that point.
So I wouldn't say it's so much as people seeing a problem and not doing anything about it. It's them being the problem and not doing anything about it.
No, I'm saying I'm sure there were groups of people that in seeing like how crazy it was, acknowledging like, okay, this is batshit crazy, but no one's saying anything.
Yeah, it took until the mayor of Massachusetts' wife and himself were accused of being witches, and he was like, okay, hold on. we're ending this right now.
All right, no more of this. There's no more witches.
We don't need to get the King of England over here, do we? Lay the smack down on you, just Rudy Poos.
So yeah, it kind of fades away. The hysteria fades away.
Yeah.
I don't really know. What was the due process at the time? You know, was there anything that existed? Because it would have had to come from overseas at the time, right?
I think it was, don't quote me on this, I think it was the son of the king, I think at the time, made, or it might have been the king himself, made like a manual, the actual, like a book, essentially, that gave details on how to handle witchcraft and like how to try witches and signs to look for.
Yeah, that was the Melissa Maleficarum.
And it gave you like all the details of how to spot a witch, how to essentially deal with one. Kind of goes into like all these details. So they were operating basically off of that.
Well, the concept of due process wasn't really developed until Sir Edward Coke developed it in the late 18th century. So that's kind of around the time where this kind of started to fade off. We actually had a process to try someone by that wasn't just he said, she said, look at that mole. So that's kind of what I think helped quell some of that finger pointing. You know, when you had an actual process you had to abide by versus just a bunch of hearsay.
Okay, yeah, so it was called Malus Maleficarum, usually translated as The Hammer of Witches, was the best known book or text about witchcraft. It's written by the German Catholic clergyman Heinrich Kramer. It was first published in the German city of Speyer in 1486. So you look back from the 15th century, and this is kind of the origins of what a witch is and how to find out what a witch is, different tiers of what a witch. You have kind of like, they're okay. They're not bad witches, up to get them.
It sounds like a captivating read. I kind of want to get a copy.
It's crazy to see some of the things that people wrote and thought back then, reading old texts like that. Like unrelated, but I found like a cookbook one time at Wonder Book from like the late 1800s and just seeing some of the recipes in that book. And the crazy thing was you could clearly tell it was like written for slaves because it's
the terminology and stuff. And I was like reading it and I should have bought it. It was like $5, but it was like from like 1890 or something like that. I was like reading through it. Yeah. And yeah, it was clearly written for like, you know, some sort of person like lower education.
Yeah. Like
maybe it was written by a slave. If it was cooking, then probably.
Yeah, could have been.
I mean, it was a cookbook, but some of like the recipes that they had, like Virginia ash cake or whatever, and it was literally taking ash out of the chimney and stuff and like incorporating into this cake thing, and it's like
interesting. Yeah, that kind of ties back. That just when you saying that reminded me, there was a thing where, in order to, back in Salem, the trials they did this something about I don't know what the proper term was, but they're like pea cakes. And it's exactly what it sounds like. And it was a way to get the evil spirits out of you after you were accused of being a witch. You would make these cakes or whatever, I don't know if it was the person that was trying to expel the demon or the possession out of you would literally pee into this thing, and they would bake it into a soul cake or something like that. And you would have to eat it. And then once you ate it, it was supposedly...
That's just spiteful.
Get rid of the...
Well, in the European witch trials, that's how one of the ways to get rid of a spell that's been cast on you by a witch is getting a little vial, fill it up halfway about with your urine, a clipping of your hair, your toenails, and then you had to boil it over, a pot and smell the vapors and the fumes, and that would dispel the curse that has been placed on you.
Clear out your sinuses a little bit.
Yeah, so it was called a witch cake. It was... it's so stupid. So basically what you do, it had the power to reveal whether a witchcraft was afflicting a person with symptoms of illness. Such a cake or biscuit was made with rye flour and the urine of the afflicted person. The cake was then fed to a dog. If the dog exhibited the same symptoms as the ill person, the presence of witchcraft was proven.
Okay, so what's the accuse here for? She walked across the ceiling yesterday. I saw her clear as day, went out through the second window, walked through the sky into that house over there. All right, let's do the pea cake thing.
I think it was actually a little more simple. It was like, oh, you're sneezing? All right, well, let's pee into a cake and see if it makes this dog sneeze.
If the dog sneezes, you're a witch.
Did this come out of that Maleficent book?
No, this is actually, I don't know where this originated from, but it was really popular during the Salem witch trials. That was, and there's got to be a bakery in Salem that still makes these, but like not. Without the pea.
I hope not.
It's like, it just has to be like a rye cake with like lemon icing or some shit on it.
I'd eat it.
It's probably be delicious, as long as it doesn't have actual pea in it.
This is just a lemon loaf cake.
Yeah.
Literal peas in it.
Yeah, lemon loaf cake with peas in it. This is kind of good, actually.
All right. So from the witch trials in Salem to kind of more modern, because like we kind of established, witchcraft doesn't die out. It just becomes a little more accepted as, like you said, the Enlightenment era goes on and people start to use their brains a little more. If you want to kind of fast forward, not to all the way to modern times, but we can kind of get up to speed there, where what witchcraft kind of is in the public eye in the last 50, 60 years or so.
Last 50 years. So it came over, I mean, it said it's always been here. It got super popular in like the 1940s in Europe, like the Wicca movement. There was a gentleman by the name of Gerald Gardner, who is often regarded as the father of Wicca. Sometimes it's referred to as craft of the wise, witchcraft, and the witch cult. In the 50s, it was referred to it that way. Gardner believed in the theory that persecuted witches had been followers of a surviving pagan religion, but the theory that it really didn't hold water. So like they kind of like, that's not... and there's actually no evidence that he ever called it Wicca, although he did refer to his community of followers as the Wicca. As the name of the religion, Wicca developed in Britain during the 1960s. It's not known who first used like the term.
So Wicca is the name of the religion, right? So someone who practices Wicca.
It
depends. It depends on who you talk to.
Is a Wiccan.
Who did you talk to?
I didn't talk to.
Who are you? Did you contact a witch?
I did. I am a wick. I am a witch.
You're a wick.
I'm a wick.
Call him Wicks for short.
We're going to start a new cult called
Nick Wicks. And we're going to dress up like John Wick, like with the suits.
Jesus.
But we're going to have wands. And
so you're just going to look like Professor Snape.
Yeah. Yeah, basically.
So like Hood Hogwarts.
Hood Hogwarts.
Oh my God.
Bro, that needs to be a movie. Hood Hogwarts.
All right, let's not get too far off topic yet.
Some people who practice Wiccan... Wicca
practices...
Practitioners of Wicca. Some of them refer to it as like a religion. Others kind of view it more as an embodiment or a way of life.
What's the difference? Wouldn't a religion and a way of life be one and the same?
Well, it's more of like the religion aspect of it. There's certain doctrines and certain texts and certain codes and core beliefs that they kind of like gravitate towards. Whereas the other view is more...
I get what you're saying. Buddhism's kind of the same way. With some people worship Buddha as an entity, and other people just kind of live by the
kind of emulate the way. Yeah, it's more about the practices and incorporating like the beliefs in like your day to day.
Okay.
You're not so much
not religious, more spiritual.
Basically, is the difference. The term Wicca in modern America, if you hear the term witchcraft, people often think of Wicca as that. Mm-hmm. But depending on who you talk to, Wicca could also just be seen as like a branch of neo-paganism. So under the branch of neo-paganism, you have heathenism, which is just
dirty heathens.
Basically, it's just like another form of like paganism. Wicca
I was gonna say it's not the same as somebody being like an atheist or something.
Well, no, atheism in some aspects is actually considered that as well, like another form of paganism. Basically, in what you were talking about earlier, the beliefs that they incorporate within these neo-paganism religions, if you want to call them practices, is supposed to be like pre-Judeo, pre-Christian, like back to the Stone Age. Okay. Or some of these beliefs.
Just very like not primitive, but a little ancient, like stripped down.
Ancient,
ancient magic kind of stuff.
The one thing I read referred to as like the horned deity, which is like some of them in Wicca, they have the horned god is one of their deities. And it's more or less.
It's not Satan.
It's not Satan. It's more of like an ancient general term, like not prehistoric, but like pre-Judeo.
Kind of prehistoric.
Kind of prehistoric, pre-Judeo, where it's more of just like an entity of like a spirit animal, like a horned. Mm-hmm. And I think the thing behind it is it's just being more in touch with nature. So that's what we have today is like a modern practicing like witch, Wicca.
Right.
And I think I could be wrong, but Wiccans in general, I don't even think they identify themselves as like witches. Like the term witches and warlocks, some of them don't even like the term because they want to kind of disassociate from that.
Right.
They don't want
the negative connotation that goes with it.
That's the current version of what witchcraft is in the US. But you got to think that also, like we were talking about earlier, like Native American culture in the US, in their culture, witches are like evil. Mm-hmm. Like so with Wicca, you practice these daily things that kind of enrich yourself and like the lives of others. There's like a positive thing you're trying to like do with
it's the white magic, like I was talking about earlier. Yeah.
But Native American culture in the US, any form of witchcraft is like a no-go. They're seen as like evil, malicious spirits, or not spirits, but
actually skinwalkers are considered witches, right? Or
maybe in some versions of it.
Mm-hmm.
This would have been a good question to ask Courtney.
Call her now.
For Native American cultures, witches are traditionally seen as criminals and witchcraft as a crime punishable by death. While some communities have passed laws specifically outlining vigilante killings, traditional views of witches and witchcraft have largely remained the same into the 20th century and through to the present among traditionals. Sources say that death was the standard punishment among Native American societies. Numerous 18th and 19th century accounts of random witch killings are recorded among the Chickasaw. Witches in these communities are defined in contrast to medicine people. So the men were often seen as like medicine men or shamans, where their role was to kind of help the community heal. Witches are seen as these like malignant individuals that are just there. Yeah, they're just there to cause chaos. Mm-hmm. Yeah. In Cherokee culture, witches are referred to as raven mockers. The raven mockers. The raven mockers are feared entities in Cherokee mythology. These figures, referred to as witches, are believed to extend their lives by preying on the sick and dying. They are described as withered in age, flying through the sky in fiery forms, emitting sounds similar to the call of a raven. After tormenting their victims, they consume their hearts, gaining the remaining years of the victim's life. Raven mockers are invisible to most people, but skilled medicine men are able to see and repel them. Once recognized, a raven mocker is said to die within 7 days.
Damn, that's metal.
Feels like a flawed system if you're going after the sick and dying and you gain their years.
Oh man, we just got one. How much more time do we have? You got 3 more days.
Oh, that's it.
Have you ever thought about just going after a healthy guy? No. It's too much work. It's interesting though that you say how you have medicine men and stuff like that kind of to dispel those types of people. And that kind of goes back, I think, to the early stages of witchcraft and like European society as well, where it wasn't inherently good or evil witchcraft practices. You could have people practicing white magic protecting you from evil witches. So kind of went hand in hand before it all just got put under one umbrella in the middle centuries, where it was just bad because the church said it was bad.
Yeah. And like in America, you know, practicing herbalism to heal people, you'd get persecuted for that.
Yeah.
You know?
I think I just seen, and this is kind of off topic, but a little bit on topic as well. There was a person up in Hanover who kind of essentially was not really practicing witchcraft, but she would do tarot readings and stuff like that for people. And somehow she had to shut down her shop because of the laws of Pennsylvania saying that she couldn't do that. So it's still a thing today.
Some
where
old law from the 1800s.
Yeah, it was like a loophole or something. And I think she fought it. I'm not sure how that's played out so far, but it's insane. It was crazy. Like, people do tarot readings all the time. How is this against the law?
Was she too accurate, or
She might have been. She might have been too good at her job.
With modern witches, as a recap, modern witches believe in harnessing nature's forces with no connection to evil or Satan.
Mm-hmm. I think that is kind of probably the most common misconception, is that witchcraft is associated with Satan worshiping.
I think part of that probably comes from like the satanic panic in like the 80s. Like that was probably a huge driving force for that.
I mean, Dungeons and Dragons was satanic then.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, from what I read, it comes from like the demonization of anything that wasn't like
mainstream.
Yeah. So I read
in
that
those early days of Christianity.
I read that Thor was a good god, you know, and then somehow in Christianity they kind of twisted it to make him this like satanic.
But the Christianity, like literally with like a lot of things, though.
Yeah,
like,
there was a lot of gods that they did that with.
Yeah, I was going to say in some instances, the Elder Futhark runes, which are basically like Nordic runes, was always associated with Satan worshiping and the Vegvisir and stuff like that. If you look, I forget what movie it was, but they pull the bed away and under the bed was the big Vegvisir. Somehow that got associated with, it was like shifted slightly or something, and that became a symbol for Satan worshiping and witchcraft.
Yeah.
I was like, how did that work? How did that? But I think it just goes back to what you were saying, where if it wasn't a inherently Christian thing, it was demonized as something that was evil, and evil is connotated with the devil. And there you go.
And it's not like surprising. Growing up, you know, I remember like in a Christian home, there was a lot of like, you can't do that. That's witchcraft. You can't do that. That's, you know, evil or whatever. And it always came back to that. Like, though, it's infected with like the enemy being Satan or whatever, you know, and just, I think more modern day witches, though, practitioners of Wicca, probably, maybe they know about Satan and like some of like the beliefs or whatever, but a lot of them probably are like, I couldn't tell you jack shit about Satan. Like, you know,
I'm certainly sure that none of them are in league with Satan.
And most of the magic that they do practice is used for healing, life improvements, finding jobs, homes, and with the intent of not causing harm.
Right.
Some of the deities in Wicca, triple goddess represents the maiden, the mother, and crone, symbolizing female life cycles and phases of the moon. Then there's the horn god that I mentioned earlier, which is the masculine counterpart associated with like nature and wilderness. So I read that it's not uncommon to find like carvings of like idols or whatever. Okay. Of like just horned, but it's not Satan though. It's more of like a spirit, like an animal, like a spirit, you know, nature, kind of an embodiment of nature.
Right.
You said it's not uncommon to find them just in Wicca in general?
Yeah, like the idea of the horned god is kind of referencing back to like the prehistoric times of like idols that they would find, which I think through time it became associated with Satan or whatever.
Or Baphomet.
But it was more or less like this was just an embodiment of like nature, testament to like a god, you know, of like nature, like a natural. Of course, Christianity.
That seems to be a pretty common theme. Like you usually look like old druids and stuff like that. They would always have animal skulls with antlers on them. And antlers just kind of seem to be, or horns seem to be that common thread that if you're close to nature, you have the antlers and the horns.
It's more of like that connection to nature and literally has nothing to do. I don't think the connotation with Satan was even there until the church showed up and
Satan has horns.
And made it that way.
Satan has horns, evil.
Well, that was the whole thing was Pan, right? Pan and Greek.
Well, he was like a half goat thing, wasn't he?
Well, that's where the image of Baphomet kind of comes from nowadays, is they took Pan and essentially demonized that. And that was kind of like the fall of like Greek culture back when like the Christianity started like taking over, like, you know, and they started killing off, but that culture started dying off, those religious beliefs. So moving away from the polytheistic view of like multiple gods and the more of the monotheistic with like the one god. Pan was kind of seen as like that downfall of like, now the enemy is like the old ways, and Pan is like the image, so like Satan, the enemy. Part of me always wonders, what if Christianity, Catholicism, whatever, what if it never like made its way over to like the United, like North America, and those other religions that were here before kind of just naturally flourished over time? Like, what if like the Spaniards never like,
even in Europe, you know, all of the pagan religions.
Yeah, exactly. You know, could you imagine if we had like a modern day mass like Aztec religion that just flourished over like 300 years or whatever? That'd be insane.
In some ways, I can see it being a negative thing because it would cause a lot more division. Having one unified religion does create some unity, even if it's sad that a lot of religions have to die for that to happen.
No.
But
I see what you're saying.
you know, there's kind of good and bad with that happening.
It's almost like put it in perspective of football or something, or sports teams. You have 32 different sports teams and you have 32 fan bases of these sports teams. They all hate each other, you know, kind of essentially, not all the time, but you know,
I get what you're saying.
So you have all these original religious practices.
I love the idea of coexisting, but humans don't do that well.
Yeah, it's like not built in our psyche.
Reality, yeah. I get what you're saying. So there's,
it's an interesting thought,
it's a double-edged, but yeah, no, just like
eventually I think over time one would become the main
More
one anyway.
prominent,
like just imagine like walking down the street, we see like crosses with all these churches, but imagine just walking down the street, you
It's
just
like a
see
totem
like
with, like,
a
the
totem or like, you know,
Thunderbird
or Thunderbirds or like, you know, Quetzalcoatl, you know, for like the Aztec culture, you know, like that's like, could you imagine like
or
that?
Thor's hammer or something. I mean,
Something
that's
like
not native to North America or anything.
But like,
that,
but like walking down Norway, you know, or like on a street down like Sweden or something, and just seeing that, which I actually saw there was a push for that a couple of years ago. Where
and it came through. It came true.
Yeah, they were like, we wanted to bring back like those old Viking pagan religions, and they pushed for it to like kind of incorporate it in like the day to day of modern Sweden, Norway.
It's been recognized, I think, as a like if you get buried in Arlington or in the military, you can have Thor's hammer instead of a cross or something on there if you identified as being a Norse pagan or whatever the case might be.
Which is pretty cool.
I'm in no way demonizing Christianity or any religion, you know.
No, exactly. Yeah. And I think that for our listeners out there, again, like, we're not.
I was raised Christian, you know.
I think we all were.
I was raised like I was raised in you were raised in a very strict Christian home. Like I was raised in a strict Christian home.
I grew up going to church every Sunday.
Like
church every other day.
United Methodist Church.
So it's like
it's just funny how as time goes on, though, not everybody's the same way we are. Where you can the worldviews change a little bit as you go through. We don't go to church every Sunday anymore, even though we grew up that way. And I think a lot of it can be, I mean, I don't know for you guys, I can't speak for you, but it's as you go through life, sometimes the practices of religion just don't apply to you anymore.
It doesn't.
And it doesn't mean that you're any less spiritual when it comes to your religious beliefs, but it's like going to church every Sunday is just not for me because
it didn't serve me. It didn't serve like.
And learning about pagan traditions like the Vikings and stuff like that, and their connection with nature and like Native American culture and connected to nature. And Wiccans connected to nature. It's like that seems to be more of a common theme than anything, where these other cultures and religions, you have a lot more freedom to explore and be more free in what you do in terms of connecting to the physical realm instead of being so tied up in a spiritual connection to a person in the sky, essentially.
Sure.
And it's not saying that I don't still believe that, but it's definitely one of those things where I think that could be a lot of things.
For sure. That's not, that's pretty much, that's where I kind of came into it too. So like in reading a lot of what I read about with Wicca and stuff like that, that to me is more relatable than, you know, the traditional going to church every Sunday.
Yeah.
Like Buddhism, I love it.
Yeah.
Like it's great. Because it's at least the versions of Buddhism where they're not worshiping Buddha as a deity, but the ones where it's like, they're just, because Buddha himself was like, I'm not a god, I'm just a dude. Like
you're just putting his practices to use in your everyday life.
Exactly. And it's and so it's more of a practical thing as opposed to like some of the more like organized religions today.
Right. It's, you know, I think it's cool how some people can, instead of saying a prayer, they burn sage or whatever. And it's
we did that
it's just as healing to them as saying a prayer is.
I burned incense and sage today.
Yeah. I do that. I mean, I don't have any sage at the moment, but I do have, when we went up to Salem, we went to the Coven's Cottage, which I love that store. I want to go back.
We need to go back.
Shout out to the Covenant Cottage. If anybody up there is listening, hell yeah. But it was like a spice blend or an herb blend to quote unquote praise Odin or, a spice mix honoring him or something. Yeah. I don't really, when I burn it, I'm not like, oh, here's my sacrifice to Odin today.
Like, man, I'm ready for Thanksgiving.
But yeah, so I definitely have done that a couple of times. Where it's more of just a connection thing where it's I light it and kind of meditate for a little while on what it is.
Yeah,
so
definitely consider myself more like agnostic. I'm just open to anything and everything.
Yeah,
Yeah. There's beautiful aspects to like every religion.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that.
I wish coexistence was more feasible as humans, but
again,
there was
we're just not wired that way.
There was a lot with Christianity that growing up made sense. Like if you,
it still does.
All religious stuff aside, if you just read like the Bible for what it actually is,
and take the 3 pillars: peace, hope, and love.
Yeah, and just like take the wisdom out. There's actually a lot of good things in the Bible that you actually can improve your life if you apply it. And it's
the people that take it too far is where it starts to lose me. Yeah.
Which the Puritans.
That is a perfect example of taking it way too far and just letting that dictate your life, which I still I can imagine. I couldn't place myself growing up in 1692 Salem, where you're literally every single day, multiple times a day, you're sitting in church for 6 hours at a time, listening to a sermon from a man who is preaching to you that if the way that you live your life is wrong and that you need to repent and everything is bad, and it's bad because you are letting it be bad because you are in league with the devil. And if you don't pray every single day, all the time, you're going to hell. It doesn't, like, no matter what you do, you have like a 1% chance of going to heaven.
It was weaponized fear.
Fire and brimstone to a T. Yeah.
I don't want to go into detail, but I grew up in a pretty extremist Christian community.
Was it like that where it was
pretty close every other day?
So it was like a Puritan society.
Pretty close. Yeah.
So you have a better experience than any of us on what it could have been like to be in 1692 Salem.
Yeah. The amount of anxiety those people must have had. Even like being fearful that your neighbor's going to see you doing something weird in your garden.
Like you just had to take a piss and like there's nowhere else to do it. So you just kind of like squat over like a pumpkin.
Oh, you're out there pissing out in your garden, eh?
You're out there talking to your chicken or something.
Yeah, like, how's my chicken today? Oh, wait, no, I can explain.
Such you're familiar there.
Such you're familiar. Yeah, exactly.
Not too long before that cock starts sucking on a tit, eh?
What a sentence.
This isn't it. This isn't what it looks like. Oh, I know exactly what this looks like.
The witch. Cock sucking on a tit.
Like, you saw it. You were there. I was there.
Look,
you saw it too.
I didn't see it. Actually, wait a minute. I did see it.
See? That's 2 of us. Yeah. Just, people were just batshit nuts insane.
Batshit insane. But kind of transitioning why we're all here today, the spooky side of it and the connotations it has with Halloween. So like I said before, when you think of witches, traditionally you think of the green witch with the black hat and all that stuff. That comes from Halloween connotations. And I tried to look into why witches were so associated with Halloween and how we got that kind of description. And I didn't really find anything specifically. It was more just came about because, like we said, how Christianity demonized witchcraft and how Halloween essentially rose to fill in the All Hallows Eve and stuff like that from pagan traditions of Samhain. The witch just kind of became synonymous with the devil's holiday being Halloween. So even going back as far as like the early 1900s, people dressed up as witches for Halloween. It was associated with evil. Halloween was supposedly an evil holiday, and that's how that kind of got started. But I wish I could have found how we got that kind of green, warty, ugly hag of a witch connotation.
I feel like it was like some sort of like Disney? 50s movie magic something.
It could have been like Sleeping Beauty or something like that. It could have been like because with the apple with the big crooked nose and stuff like that. Maybe it could have came a little bit from that, but again, it was before then where witches were still being dressed up as in the early 1900s and stuff.
Well, a lot of the...
Could have been Renaissance paintings, for all I know. It could have been, somebody in the 1500s made a Renaissance painting of what a witch, quote unquote, looks like, and that's where it comes from.
Well, you have like Slavic tradition, I believe it's Slavic, the Baba Yaga.
Okay.
Like traditions like that where I don't really think they're depicted with like green skin, but the
Just a
whole
long, crooked
image
nose and-
just being like an old hag.
Yeah.
Like or what were the things in Skyrim? The hag ravens.
Yeah.
But that image of this old hag like
Decrepit.
lady decrepit, I think that's always been around for a very long time. So I think if anything, a lot of the depictions of what we have of witches probably comes from some form of that.
That's true.
But I thought the green nose, green skin thing, I thought that kind of came to light because of the Wizard of Oz.
You think?
Wasn't that like the first time that a witch was like depicted like on screen?
It could have been.
Those depicted like that, and since then,
See, I couldn't find a timeline of where the Green Witch in kind of like traditional media, what we think of being like on a picture or a poster or something like that, because you can look back on Halloween decorations and find those depictions of a witch like that. So I don't know what the timeline, because The Wizard of Oz would have been a black and white movie for the longest time until color technology came around in the 50s.
Maybe.
So
yeah. What about literature? The Wizard of Oz, it was a book, right? Before it was a movie?
could have been. Yeah, it could have
So
been.
maybe
Maybe they described her as
that.
That's true. That's true.
Apparently, the pointed hats come from medieval depictions of foreigners, marginalized groups like Jews or heretics who were often forced to wear conical hats. I guess they were like pointed hats.
That
So they
checks out.
started-
That's some historic shit right
Yeah,
there. That is some
associating
historic.
it with othering people.
That's some historic bullshit there.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's, of course, there's some negative connotation with foreigners. Why am I not surprised?
And then the connotation of witches riding brooms came along in the like 1400s. The first one that admitted to it was actually a man named, I'm probably going to butcher his name, Guillaume Edelin, who was a priest from Saint Germain-en-Laye near Paris. So he was a French priest who claimed that he rode a besom, as it were, back then. And then, so they had started connotating that in the 1450s when two illustrations appeared to the French manuscript, The Defender of Ladies. In the two drawings, one woman soars through the air on a broom, the other flies aboard a plain white stick, both with headscarves that identify them as Waldensians, members of a Christian sect founded in the 12th century, who were branded as heretics by the Catholic Church.
So they were depicted flying. I just want to know how you go from like just hopping on a broomstick and like taking off, you know?
So
That have something to do with like hallucinogens or something?
it was said that broomsticks were thought to be the perfect vehicles for the special ointments and salves that witches brewed up to give themselves the ability to fly. So they would make these potions and then rub them on their broomsticks, and then, in a little more graphic sense of the word,
That was what you're describing is what I heard was
Yeah.
like what I'm more familiar with.
yeah, so they would put these potions on the broomstick, and then they would get on the broomstick so that they could absorb the potion through their intimate areas.
Yeah.
And that's how the broomstick, you know.
Riding the broomstick.
Yeah.
That's where that comes from. Yeah.
And then, of course, being a broom, as time goes on, brooms start to become associated more with the doting housewife and stuff like that. So, and witches being traditionally women, just kind of naturally fell in together.
Mm-hmm.
And they would say that witches could ride the broomsticks out the chimneys. So if you've seen a broom next to a house or propped against a door or something, that means that she was home and stuff like that. It's it's very, I don't know if sexist is the right word, but it's along those lines.
Sexist is the right word. That's
Misogynistic a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Just another form of control. There's a book called Shroom by Andy Lecter. Lecter or Letcher, one of the two. But it's about essentially how magic mushrooms and psilocybin from the shamans in I think like Siberia up until like modern day deadheads or whatever. Really great book. But he explores like just how it's kind of imbued in like its culture. But he talks about that in there where riding the broom, like they would mash up like or make concoctions out of psilocybin mushrooms, you know, and like, and of course to apply it that way and start tripping balls or whatever. And I think in the book, he posits that part of the witch scares, the hysteria or whatever. And a lot of these instances where they were like hysterical or whatever, and like it's a possibility that they were like tripping on like mushrooms or whatever. They could have been using it for like healing properties or whatever, maybe like exploring, you know, like what it does. But that's where the hysteria comes from. But it didn't help their case though, because they're tripping balls and speaking to things that aren't there. So then people are like, oh, they're in league with the devil or whatever, you know?
Right.
What instance am I thinking about where the grain was funky?
Oh, that was a theory in the Salem trials.
Was it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's something, some kind of mold or something that was growing on the flour or the yeast or something. Yeah, I think that was been proved as just not
incorrect,
true.
Yeah.
I think with like werewolves too. Werewolves, it was seen as the same premise. The people were eating moldy bread and like tripping balls and thinking that they were seeing people turn into werewolves or whatever. But it was
I honestly think it's just the fact that what else is there to do? In those times, people had imaginations back then. No. It's not like they were sure the way they lived was a lot different than us, but inherently
bored and anxious. They had
bored
to
and
be
anxious and
full of anxiety.
Yeah, anxiety. No, it was more anxiety driven than anything. So when you're already anxious, you're already like on high alert. Your brain's already naturally like looking for everything to confirm.
Right.
If we're looking for witches, your brain and you're anxious and you got a potential target on your back, you're going to be looking for everything to confirm that other people are witches. You know.
Yeah.
It was straight survival mode.
And like you're saying, werewolves and stuff like that. I mean, your imagination, the woods are scary in 1692. I mean, you don't go in the woods. You don't know what's in there. It's very possible witches and werewolves and vampires and blah, blah, blah are all out there. And none of it is, but I mean, they don't know that.
And, that place wasn't mapped yet. And they don't know what's out there.
Exactly. And again, the indigenous people are in the woods and they're moving around. They can hear people in the woods screaming and, whatever they're doing out there. And just your imagination goes crazy. Just imagine being a kid and you're sitting by a tree line in a forest and you hear people laughing and hooping and hollering. And it's just indigenous people out hunting or in their camps or whatever. No. You don't know that they're in there.
No.
It's a ghost or it's a whatever. So, but yeah. That's witches and Halloween as far as I got.
Did you find anything on familiars as far as like the origins of where that came from? I
didn't really. Black cats and owls seem to be like the symbolic, two popular ones. But I think anything could have been a familiar. Yeah. Like we kind of touched on, if you had any kind of defect on your body that was determined to be a witch's teat, as you said earlier. And it just kind of depended on who accused you of what your familiar could have been. It could have been a cat, or it could have been a bat, or a frog, or a toad, or a turtle, or anything. It could have been it's just a bird. It's an animal. So I think the connotation of like a black cat and stuff just became the most popular ones because they look evil.
But to be fair, the one black cat that I did have was completely evil. I think it was mean as all get out. I miss that cat.
So what are your closing thoughts? What are your favorite witches and wizards in pop culture or in general, in real life?
And if you could choose a familiar, what would it be?
That's my familiar right there.
Noodle?
Noodle. Look at him. Just being his own little noodle self.
Those who don't know, Noodle is his cat.
Noodle's my cat.
We'll post a picture of Noodle.
We should. That'd be good. Good.
We all three have that litter of cats. You have Noodle and Mochi, and I have Freya. The best cats.
The three siblings.
The best kitties that ever lived.
So Noodle's my familiar. Bruin's also my familiar too.
Oh God, that checks out.
Yeah. Favorite wizard
or witch?
Well, I have one. I have both. There's so many good wizards out there. Of course, Gandalf is probably number one. He's just so great.
He's the man.
He's just great. And Gandalf the White. When he shows up as the White.
Okay, I like Gandalf the Gray. So there.
I like them both, but like the White for different reasons. But Gandalf the White, when he just shows up and
ready to fuck shit up,
and yeah, witches. That one in the Twilight of the Gods, she's pretty badass. The witch that's running around with them.
I remember her name.
I forget what her name is.
How could she be your favorite if you don't even know her name?
Dude, like you're gonna see, we're gonna watch. Like she like fuck shit off. Like she's like.
You're only in episode 5.
Yeah, it's gonna get worse.
So wait till you get towards the end there.
Yeah, like she's pretty OP. Yeah, which though I don't know.
We can just say Gandalf's your favorite.
Yeah, we'll just leave it at that. Gandalf.
Brittany, what about you?
I like the classic Wicked Witch of the West.
Oh,
I like Maleficent.
Oh, yeah,
Angelina Jolie version.
She's very cool.
I don't think I've ever seen that movie.
Good old Ursula. She was technically a witch.
She's technically a witch. Is she like a sea witch?
What's the comedian chick's version? God, what's her name? Have you seen that in real life?
Melissa McCarthy?
Yeah.
Oh, she was Ursula? Yeah. Aubrey Plaza being that witch and
Agatha all along.
Agatha, yeah.
I'm going to pour one out for Professor McGonagall.
Oh my gosh.
What a legend. Lost her too soon, even though she was like 86. She should have lived forever.
And exactly a year after Dumbledore.
Yeah, which would also be one of my favorite wizards. Even though he kind of was like really nonchalant about the whole thing. Every year, Harry was almost dying, and he was like, it's all good.
Well, I mean, like, you kind of see, though, in like the last movie, why
he had to die.
Yeah, because he was like well prepared the whole time. Like he saw the prophecy.
He's like, if Harry dies, that's a Horcrux gone. Thank goodness.
So he knew the whole entire time.
Voldemort can't come back if Harry just dies already.
No.
He's like, I can't be the one to kill him, but I'm not going to say anybody here can.
Snape, look in your pocket. Is that a 44? Oh, how'd that get there? Whoa. Yeah, this bullet has Harry's name written on it. That's crazy. That is insane. Who would have done that? Black magic.
So yeah, I would probably go, since you said Gandalf the Grey for me. Just I think he's so goofy, and that's why I like him. He's more like just the good time having version of Gandalf before the events of the Ring tragedies start.
Merlin's pretty cool.
Oh yeah, Merlin is cool.
Merlin's pretty dope. Like he's like the OP.
He's the OG OP. Mm-hmm. You ever dress up as a witch for Halloween?
I haven't. Thought about doing it this year.
Yeah.
That'll be a first.
I think I was as close as I ever got to dressing as a witch when we went to Salem, and I had like the druid mask thing. Mm-hmm. I think it was as close as I've ever gotten. Well, you, Nick, you ever put on a pair of high heels and a pointy hat?
Oh yeah.
You got the beard.
Running down the street.
You could be a wizard for Halloween.
I should be a wizard. I'd be Merlin.
There you go.
Are there any black wizards?
Blizzard.
I was thinking Blackula, but he's not a wizard.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never heard of a mainstream black wizard. Well, so I guess I have to be the first.
I guess you do. Nick the Great.
I would just keep it as Nick.
All right. Well, I think that's going to put a bow on our little episode here on witches and witchcraft and stuff like that. As always, you can find us on Facebook, Shadows and Sightings, a paranormal podcast. Instagram, Shadows and Sightings Pod, or send us an email, shadowsandsightings@gmail.com. Kicking off spooky season with this episode. Our next episode is also going to be spooky related. Salem. Yeah, we're going to talk about Salem. We talked a little bit about Salem today, but we're going to dive into more spooky aspects of Salem next time around, and our own personal visits there. We went back in 2022. It was a good time. So stay tuned for that. Tell your friends about us. Leave us a good review on whatever platform you're listening to us on. 5 stars is great. Boosts us in the algorithm. But just telling your friends to check us out does a world of good. Also, check out our merch shop. It's on our Facebook. So go buy a t-shirt or a hoodie or whatever. Or both. And we're working on getting some new stuff. Keep an eye out for that as well. You guys have any other closing thoughts? Or did I get everything?
That wraps it up, yeah.
All right. Then we'll talk to you next time when we talk about all things spooky.